Breaking news this Wednesday night, the U.S. president's new punishing auto tariffs.
This is very modest.
How big a blow it will be to Canada's auto industry, already dealing with steel and aluminum tariffs. A 3-year-old mystery solved. The Indigenous woman murdered by a Winnipeg serial killer is finally identified. Alberta's premier fires back.
They want this lady and Alberta to just sit down and shut up.
Why she's defending a trip to Florida to appear at a fundraiser with a right-wing American podcaster.
It's remarkably dumb.
And a hockey trade you can't put a price on.
I thought the occasion was perfect to give it back.
A fan of the Montreal Canadiens' act of kindness towards a star player after his mother died of cancer.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We have breaking news about new tariffs just announced by the American president. Donald Trump is imposing a tariff on all automobiles brought into the U.S. He says he expects auto firms to relocate to the United States and build new plants there or expand existing ones.
What we're going to be doing is a 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
Trump says they are permanent and will come into effect on April 2nd. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney, who is in the midst of campaigning as the new federal Liberal leader, calls it entirely unjustified and a direct attack on Canadian workers. All of this is injecting more uncertainty into the economy during the federal election campaign, and the auto industry and its employees are bracing for impact. Our coverage begins with Mackenzie Gray, who is covering Mark Carney's campaign.
In the shadow of a historic symbol of Canada-U.S. trade, Mark Carney promised to protect, help save the auto sector.
We will build a stronger and more resilient auto industry.
But just hours later, Donald Trump made it clear that he had other plans.
Right now, a car would be made here, sent to Canada, sent to Mexico, sent all over the place. It's ridiculous.
Signing an executive order to put a 25% tariff on finished cars from Canada, blasting a hole in the highly integrated Canada-U.S. supply chain that's been a model for how free trade works. But it's not just cars, it's also Canadian parts.
They're going to move their parts divisions back to the United States because some of them were made in Canada and some of them were made in Mexico and other places. They'll be moving their parts division back to the United States.
The Prime Minister promising Canada would push back but gave no specifics.
We have other options for those retaliatory tariffs. This will hurt us, but through this period, by being together, we will emerge stronger. We will defend our workers.
Carney had previously said he would only speak with Trump if he showed Canada respect, but these tariffs seem to have changed the calculus.
I think it would be appropriate that the President and I speak, given the action that he's taken. I'm sure that will happen soon.
Auto trade between Canada and the U.S. is worth over $50 billion a year, an industry on the Canadian side that is now in jeopardy.
What I can tell you is that none of this is good for Canadian jobs and Canadian workers right now.
The president of Unifor warning the impact is not just on the auto tariffs, but also on steel and aluminum levies.
It's not just about the tariffs that we're facing today. It is the impact of those tariffs on jobs, but also investment. Investment today, investment next week, and investment a year or two from now.
Mark Carney was supposed to fly to Quebec City Wednesday evening. Instead, he's heading to the nation's capital. Thursday morning, he'll have an emergency meeting of the Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee. Donna?
Okay, Mackenzie Gray, thanks. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford said late today he has spoken to the Prime Minister and says Canada needs to stand firm, strong and united. And Ford says he fully backs any retaliatory tariffs being prepared.
We're going to make sure that we inflict as much pain as possible to the American people without inflicting pain on the Canadian population.
The auto sector plays a huge role in Ontario's and in Canada's economy. Our senior business correspondent, Anne Gaviola, is with me. Anne, how hard-hitting could these automotive tariffs be on Canada?
Donna, vehicles are Canada's second largest export by value at $51 billion. The vast majority of those, 93%, go to the U.S. Auto manufacturing accounts for more than 128,000 direct jobs across Canada, with most of those jobs located in Ontario. And when you factor in jobs tied to the auto industry, well, that number balloons to more than 500,000 positions. So the ripple effect of tariffs on employment is significant.
And Canadian manufacturers are already dealing with tariffs on steel and aluminum, piling automotive tariffs on top of that. How long before the auto sector might have to shut down?
A new 25% tariff on cars and light trucks not made in the U.S. effective April 2nd. And we know the industry already dealing, as you mentioned, with a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum. With the threat of potential additional tariffs, it's not clear what the total tariff number will be for the industry. So figuring out how much runway it has is tricky. But we know that supply chains are deeply integrated. And if these hefty tariffs remain in place, then we could see assembly lines on both sides of the border shut down in a matter of 7 days. Donna?
And Gaviola in Toronto, thank you. NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh was in London, Ontario as this news broke, a place where the auto sector is a big player, and he's putting pressure on the government to support auto workers who may face layoffs. Touria Izri is traveling with the NDP Leaders campaign.
The blow to Canada's auto sector will hit Ontario hard and is forcing leaders on the campaign trail to switch gears.
This is a direct attack on our workers, and we've got to fight back like hell. We got to fight back with retaliatory tariffs.
Jagmeet Singh reacted in London, a region home to thousands of auto workers.
Just a lot of people worried that, they have to put up with this for the next 4 years, and there's no way of knowing what he's going to do. It's up, it's down, the tariffs are in play, then they're not. It's so uncertain.
The Mark Carney should have put in place protections for workers before going to an election, knowing these threats were there.
The NDP leader campaigned in Hamilton earlier in the day, but made no specific policy proposals on tariff relief.
Canada's not for sale, you're right.
Yes.
Singh used his time in Steeltown to visit a seniors rec center and a pizza shop.
Oh, look at that, huh?
The New Democrats, which are struggling in the polls, rolled out their tax plan.
Our focus is on the middle class, middle and low income folks. We have a fair approach that helps those that need it. We're not trying to help out millionaires.
Anyone making less than nearly $178,000 a year will not pay taxes on the first $19,500 they earn. That would save individuals $505 a year, costing the government $10.4 billion.
In the middle, the NDP proposal is more generous than the other ones. At the high end, the Conservative version is much more generous than the other proposals. But all three provide no support to folks living in poverty at the low end of the spectrum.
The NDP is vowing to cut GST on more essential items, double the disability benefit, and boost GIS for low-income seniors.
But any announcement threatens to be derailed by Donald Trump. Singh held a campaign event in London where we spoke to an auto worker who said the industry has already gone through tough times and is anxious about more to come. Donna?
All right, Touria Izri, thank you. The Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre is also condemning Trump's auto tariffs, calling them unjustified and unprovoked.
These tariffs will damage his workers and his economy, just as they will damage ours. We must retaliate.
Poilievre is now in Quebec, where he is working to keep and build on the 9 seats the party holds there. Mike Armstrong reports.
The maiden flight for Pierre Poilievre's campaign plane carried him to Quebec City, the Conservative leader breaking through the clouds to land in a province where he's had trouble breaking through politically.
We need a new Conservative government that will put Canada first.
Now, the good news for Poilievre in this province is that he hasn't lost much support since Mark Carney took over the top of the Liberal ticket. It's hurt the Bloc Québécois more. The problem is Poilievre's support seems flat.
I'm not sure how heavily Mr. Poilievre will campaign in Quebec after all, right? If I were to advise him, I would say, just to spend a lot of time in Ontario.
Now, Poilievre has put in the work. In the 30 months since becoming leader, he's visited Quebec often, promising to respect provincial jurisdictions and hitting over and over at affordability, housing, and immigration.
All those core messages were actually very well aligned with Quebec voters.
So why the lack of traction? Well, Poilievre may be losing style points. He's done more interviews with top personalities in Quebec than in English Canada, but they have at times been testy. This was his first answer in an interview with the TVA network. It did get smoother eventually. But Poilievre's gone after the mayors of Quebec's 2 biggest cities, calling them incompetent in social media.
Incompétent.
and in press conferences.
Il y a du monde qui trouve que j'ai.
Well, he may have noticed the critique of his tone. In this campaign ad, Poilievre argues that handling U.S. President Donald Trump takes more than charm, brushing off concerns he's too direct.
It certainly is acknowledging that it's a style that maybe not everybody likes.
La politesse canadienne est allée trop loin.
Now, Poilievre has been asked repeatedly about his tone and whether he should be less confrontational with his opponents. His response, that he doesn't have to be polite with people who are ruining the country, may not be a strong way to win votes in Quebec. Donna?
All right, Mike Armstrong in Quebec City, thanks. Alberta's premier is defending her planned trip to Florida to appear at a fundraiser with outspoken right-wing American podcaster Ben Shapiro. He has called Canada a silly country that should be annexed by the U.S. Smith is also taking heat for an interview she did with the American right-wing media outlet Breitbart, part of which the Liberals are now using in a campaign ad.
Conservative Premier Danielle Smith said that Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump are in sync.
The perspective that Pierre would bring would be very much in sync with, I think, where the new direction in America.
What part of Trump's vision?
With me from Calgary is Adam McVicker. Adam, how is the Premier responding?
Donna, a significant doubling down by Alberta Premier Danielle Smith defending that trip to Florida to speak with a right-wing media personality as defending Canada's interests in the ongoing trade dispute, while also taking shots at both the federal Liberals and NDP in a fiery speech in Alberta's legislature.
It's apparently treason to talk to American media personalities that we disagree with. It is disloyal to try and persuade high-profile Republicans holding influence with the president to abandon his tariff policies on Canada. I will not be silent. Alberta will not be silent. We will not be pushed around and called traitors.
Smith is speaking at an event Thursday hosted by PragerU, a content company that describes itself as promoting American values. The $1,500 U.S. ticket fundraiser will see her joined by right-wing commentator Ben Shapiro. Smith has faced calls to cancel the trip due to past comments from Shapiro suggesting support for President Trump's 51st state rhetoric. But she says premiers have all been encouraged to travel south and do as many media appearances as possible to try and sway the president and American public opinion, suggesting a change in tone from the Liberals under Mark Carney. Smith today also defended her comments that the tariff threat is hurting Conservative Leader Pierre Poilievre, but whether her advocacy will pay dividends remains to be seen. Donna.
Okay, Adam McVicker in Calgary, thank you. Winnipeg police have identified the fourth victim of a serial killer, a woman who until now has been known as Buffalo Woman. Her real name is Ashley Shingoose. She was a 30-year-old mother from St. Teresa Point First Nation in northern Manitoba. As Melissa Ridgen reports, police say new information led to her being identified, and they say a second landfill search now needs to happen.
For 3 years, she's been a faceless silhouette alongside Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, and Mercedes Myron. Today, we know her name, Ashley Shingoose. Her family and advocates believed all along Shingoose was one of convicted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky's victims. Shingoose was last seen in March 2022 near the Salvation Army in downtown Winnipeg, the same area the killer hunted his other victims. Her DNA was found in the killer's apartment, but not enough evidence was found for an identification until new information came from the killer himself.
Additional information was received which led our investigators to seek further forensic testing of exhibits in an effort to positively identify Buffalo Woman. Results from those forensic tests were received on March 11th, 2025, and March 24th of this year.
Police believe her body is in the Brady Road landfill south of Winnipeg, where partial remains of Contois were found. Earlier this month, the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron were identified in a different landfill north of the city after a years-long battle to search the site, something Winnipeg's new police chief addressed.
We have had time for reflection, almost nearly 3 years. While we cannot undo the past, we can learn from it.
That means a search for Shingoose will soon be underway. No political wrangling, no refusal by police, no bickering about the feasibility and cost. Police, city and provincial leaders all say they're committed to bringing Shingoose home so her family can have that same closure as the Harris, Myron and Contois families. Donna.
All right, Melissa Ridgen in Winnipeg, thank you. Angry Palestinians take to the streets in Gaza. Coming up, what they're demanding from Hamas. At least 24 people have been killed as out-of-control wildfires ripped through southeastern South Korea. The deaths include a helicopter pilot involved in the firefight. Flames have burned over 17,000 hectares and at least 27,000 people have been forced to flee their homes. In Gaza, hundreds of Palestinians have been protesting, demanding Hamas step down from power. Hamas has governed Gaza since 2007, and its military wing orchestrated the October 7th attacks on Israel. Now that Gaza is in ruins and there's no ceasefire, people are fed up and demanding change. Redmond Shannon reports.
Palestinians voicing their anger, not at Israel, but at Hamas. Hundreds of Gazans protesting against the political and militant group for a second day. This man says Hamas is an accomplice with Israel in the death of Gazan children. This man demands Hamas stop the war and leave power. In the almost 2 decades since Hamas took control of Gaza, there have been no elections, and the Strip has been under an Israeli-imposed blockade. Since the Hamas-led attacks on Israel almost a year and a half ago, the war has obliterated Gaza and killed tens of thousands. Hundreds more have died since Israel ended the 2-month ceasefire last week. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the protests show his policy is working. He also threatened to annex parts of Gaza unless more Israeli hostages are released. Gauging the real level of support for Hamas is difficult. Recent polls suggest it has anywhere from 6 to 35% support. The main alternative, Fatah, rules the occupied West Bank, although it is often accused of corruption and incompetence too.
There is a leadership deficit, a Palestinian leadership deficit that has to be addressed.
A senior Hamas official said people have the right to protest, but he also criticised what he called suspicious political agendas at play. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Ahead, how 3 people survived a crash landing on an icy Alaska lake. There's an incredible story of survival out of Alaska. A single-engine plane went down on a remote lake south of Anchorage about 10:30 Sunday night. The pilot, a 38-year-old man, and his 2 daughters managed to climb onto a wing and spent 12 hours huddling there. The plane partly submerged. They were spotted by another pilot who was part of a search team. The Alaska Army National Guard was able to bring a helicopter in and rescue them. And despite the conditions, none of them have life-threatening injuries. The Atlantic magazine has now published the entire group chat its editor-in-chief was inadvertently included in. Top U.S. national security officials discussed in detail how they would launch military strikes on targets in Yemen. It's embarrassing on so many levels, especially since the Pentagon had recently warned about using Signal because it can be hacked. Reggie Cicchini reports.
There were no sources, methods, locations, or war plans that were shared.
Doubling down in their denials, U.S. intelligence heads insist that details about a strike in Yemen discussed in a Signal chat where reporter Jeffrey Goldberg was president were not classified. And so the Atlantic called their bluff, publishing highly sensitive material detailing what military assets like jets and drones would be used, and crucially, the precise timing of the launches, information that could have put U.S. service members in danger.
It's by the awesome grace of God that we are not mourning dead pilots right now.
The texts also reveal more on America's intended targets. First target, the National Security Advisor said of a perceived Houthi missile expert, we had positive ID of him walking into his girlfriend's building, and it's now collapsed.
F-18s are military systems, correct? Weapon systems.
They are.
MQ-9s is a weapon system, correct?
They are.
Okay. We clearly have weapon systems that have been identified. That is classified information.
This is signaling to the entire world that our most senior leaders have poor operational security.
The administration sees it differently.
I think the American public should decide for themselves based on the outcome of this operation.
The unexpected access, now an embarrassment for the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who entered the most sensitive details into the chat, is also under fire.
My job is to provide updates in real time, general updates in real time, keep everybody informed. That's what I did.
Secretary Hegseth must resign immediately.
Democrats are seeking accountability as probes deepen about how many of these text chains exist or existed on a chat platform only approved for non-classified material.
I used an appropriate channel to communicate sensitive information.
Communicating these sorts of things in Signal is not okay.
Security experts argue humans are often the weakest link in cyber defenses. Yet Donald Trump has expressed nothing but support for those on this text chain. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
Next, a gift for Gallagher, the heartwarming gesture for a hockey player who lost his mother to cancer. It's often small, thoughtful gestures that can have the deepest meaning. After Montreal Canadiens hockey player Brendan Gallagher lost his mother to cancer, a Habs fan was moved to offer him a gift, a special gift. The emotional interaction played out on social media, and now, as Dan Spector reports, she has been invited to join Gallagher on the ice for a moment she will never forget.
There's a signature?
This purple and white Brendan Gallagher Montreal Canadiens jersey is Lucie Lachance's prized possession, but she can't wait to give it away.
It's gonna be emotional. I feel like we're all gonna cry.
The Canadian star wore it in team warm-ups in 2022 as part of the NHL's Hockey Fights Cancer initiative before it went up for auction to benefit cancer research. Lachance made the winning bid, just over $1,500.
On the tag it says, "I'm fighting for," and he wrote, "Mom."
Della Gallagher passed away earlier this month after a 3.5-year battle with brain cancer. Doctors originally gave her 6 to 18 months to live.
I'm really proud of her fight. I'm really proud of everything she did for us. She was so strong, so courageous, and really just the best mom.
When Gallagher knocked home an empty netter in the Habs' win against the Ottawa Senators last week, he tapped his heart in tribute to his mom. A couple days later, Lucy reached out to him on social media, saying she felt he should have the jersey if he wanted it.
I thought the occasion was perfect to give it back so it can go back in the family where it belongs.
Gallagher responded with gratitude and offered a jersey swap on Bell Center ice next month.
I'm gonna look at the sky and I'm gonna blow a kiss to his mother, Della, and say, "This is for you, Della."
As Gallagher lives through the pain of losing his mother, he and his wife recently celebrated the birth of their first daughter. Her middle name is Della. Dan Spector, Global News, Montreal.
That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada showcases Regina, Sandy Hook, Manitoba, and Bon Bay Pond, Newfoundland and Labrador. Thanks for watching and hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.